Really, what I intend to do is just give you a bit of a roundup of what's happening in the multi-asset world, both funds and MPS. Set some context for some of the speakers that you've heard today, and if you'll indulge me, maybe just a 2-minute introduction to what the AJ Bell proposition is in the multi-asset world. Okay, so without further ado, let's crack on, because multi-asset has been really quite a phenomenon over the past decade within the investment world. You know, if you were to go back a lot earlier on in the 1990s, balanced mandates were all of the rage, particularly in institutional space. So a lot of institutional investors would have employed a single manager to manage all of their assets across all of the globe, both fixed income, equities, and alternatives. And that's something that's been really imported into the retail world in recent years and has really taken off over the past decade. You know, so post-financial crisis 2008, 2009, a lot of advisors thought, hang on a minute, do I really want to be managing these portfolios and potentially on the hook for investment performance? And then, of course, post-RDR, that's really when multi-asset funds have taken off. So they've been an absolute phenomenon in the retail world, so much so that it now accounts for around 20% of all of the assets managed in the IA sectors. That's £220 billion worth of assets. And over the past decade, it's accounted for around £76 billion worth of net flows. And it's gone on from strength to strength. So even just in the last couple of years, more than a third of the net sales in the IA sectors are accounted for through multi-asset vehicles. And multi-asset in this context does include the volatility managed sectors, which account for about 3 to 4% of total assets in the IA sectors. And in the last 2 years alone, £16 billion of net flows has come into the multi-asset world. What's the experience been like at AJ Bell? Well, we're in quite a unique position in the investment world at being a at-scale platform, not only in the institutional and advisor space via Invest Centre, but of course we also have access to what's going on in the retail market through our UInvest platform. So all I'm going to show you here is kind of what's been the experience from multi-asset funds, both from a retail perspective, which is what you're looking at on the slide right now, and what you'll see there is, on the whole, whilst there's been ebbs and flows, but on the whole, and particularly for the past 2 years or so, there's been an increasing take-up of multi-asset funds from retail investors. Retail investors, what you tend to find here is your newer investor comes onto the UInvest platform and says, I really don't know what I'm doing here. Now, of course, we have lots of people who trade Tesla and your standard UK equities, Lloyds banks, etc. But more and more of your newer investors are coming to this world attracted by investment returns and are saying, do this for me, invest all my money in a single fund, and increasingly they're taking more and more multi-asset approaches. Now, that's interesting in the context of what's happened in the advisor world, or certainly advisors who use the AJ Bell platform. And what we've seen here is, again, ebbs and flows, but the general trend, the usage of multi-asset funds from advisors who use Invest Centre has been generally on the decrease. Now, don't get me wrong, there's been net inflows into multi-asset funds on the Invest Centre platform, because what you're seeing here is a proportion of use. Now, the flows have increased because as a platform, we've gone from strength to strength. But as a proportion of usage, what you've seen is generally a bit of a trend downwards in terms of the extent to which multi-asset funds are being used. And you might pause for a moment there and think, hold on a minute, you've just told me that multi-asset funds and multi-asset solutions are on the rise, so what's happening here? It's a very easy explanation, and it's really where kind of we'll come in right now, and that's the growth in the multi-asset MPS solutions that we're seeing not just on the AJ Bell investment platform, but across the advisor world in general. And what you're seeing on this slide is numbers for the past couple of years, where the MPS market's gone from just under 20 billion of assets to well over 30 billion of assets just in 2 years' time. You've had nearly 9 billion of flows into MPS solutions, multi-asset propositions, and that's a compound annual growth of over 30%. So this, not only multi-asset, but MPS solutions are very much in vogue with advisors right now. And kind of the reasons for that are really quite clear to understand when you start to unpick what's going on here. Most people who are adopting multi-asset solutions are either new advisors who are saying, I don't want to get involved in investment propositions whatsoever. I just want to choose the appropriate investment manager for my clients. Or alternatively, we're seeing more and more advisors who've been in the industry for long periods of time, probably built their own model portfolios, particularly in a pre-RDR world, but are now looking to outsource investments and focus on financial planning. And they came first of all to multi-asset fund solutions, but they're coming more and more these days to MPS solutions. Why is that? Well, if you think about it from a client's perspective and the advisor's perspective, if you've been used to serving up your clients a portfolio on a fund-of-fund multi-asset basis, a list of individual funds for your model portfolios, the transition from a model portfolio consisting of a number of funds to a single line, single price solution might just be a step too far. And so the MPS solution offers clients and advisors a transition from individual model portfolios as directed by their advisor to an outsourced model portfolio solution managed on a segregated basis by a discretionary portfolio manager. And as a consequence, you've got this slow transition from model portfolios to outsourced solutions, but without that jarring impact in terms of client valuation, client presentation. And so that's why we're seeing MPS increasingly more advantageous to advisors, and more advisors are taking up MPS as opposed to buying multi-asset funds. That explains the growth, and as a consequence of kind of what we see in the marketplace, both retail and in the advisor world, we think we're in a position to make some predictions about what we'll see going forward. So our first prediction is we genuinely do believe that we'll see increased MPS penetration within the marketplace. Some people will transition from multi-asset funds as those client sizes get larger and larger into MPS solutions. We will continue to see, we believe, more and more advisors looking to outsource their investment offering to a discretionary portfolio manager, not necessarily because they think the discretionary portfolio manager is anyway able to deliver better investment returns, but the administration processes of managing model portfolios, particularly over multiple years, as you get more and more vintages of portfolios, the administrative burden becomes increasingly higher and higher, so that more and more people are looking to outsource their investment solution. And on top of that, the cost of MPS is increasingly coming lower. It's got to the stage now where people are increasingly more predisposed to outsource, and we think the MPS solution is more advantageous and more acceptable to clients and advisors, and hence we see more and more MPS penetration. As a consequence of that increased penetration, we think in the next 5 years, MPS sales will start to outstrip multi-asset fund sales. And there's a number of reasons why that's the case. But the consequence of all of that new money coming into the marketplace will also attract new entrants into the marketplace. You know, I think of Schroders, for example, who have just launched their own MPS solution. You will expect to see, or we certainly expect to see, more of your big household names, the Vanguards, BlackRocks of this world, coming into the MPS world, which has previously been a domain that they've left to your more traditional stockbroker, DFM type of asset house. As a consequence of the increased concentration and competition in the MPS marketplace, we also think you'll see new pricing models as well. And indeed, we've started to see new pricing models. Gone are the days where it's purely about ad valorem, let's get to the lowest possible cost. And your most MPS solutions will typically be priced somewhere between 15 and 30 basis points, plus or minus VAT, depending on who you use. We're increasingly now starting to see some MPS providers say, we won't treat your clients on an individual basis, we'll treat you as an advisor on a practice basis, and we'll quote you for all of your business within your practice, rather than each client on an ad valorem basis. The real kind of catalyst, as we see it, in terms of what will be the reason why people will go from buying multi-asset funds to increasingly using MPS solutions, it's performance comparison. This is key kind of reason that we still see more and more money going towards multi-asset funds, in our opinion, as opposed to MPS. We think MPS has the edge on funds in terms of client and advisor acceptance. However, the big Achilles heel for MPS at the moment is the ability to do a whole of market performance comparison of all the MPS solutions that are out there. Now, this is something we're really passionate about at AJ Bell, and we're working with others within the industry in order to come up with a solution for this. It ought to be as easy to see the performance of every MPS operator in the marketplace as it is to every multi-asset fund operator in the marketplace. And that's something we'll make some announcements on at a later date. But we think the two of them, once they're aligned, we'll see more and more business going towards MPS solutions as opposed to multi-asset funds. And as a consequence of that, once you've got this consistency in terms of the ability to do whole of market reviews, we think further down the line, 3 to 5 years hence, because you've got to remember, of course, if you buy a fund, you know with certainty that every client within that fund will have exactly the same performance profile. That's not the case for MPS. Because every client has their own segregated mandate, we think in 3 to 5 years' time, one of the key things that people will be looking for when they're choosing their MPS provider is not just the performance of the MPS provider, but also the consistency, the bunching of those clients around the model portfolio performance. That performance consistency will become an increasingly important feature when you're choosing your MPS provider. That's something that we would anticipate going forward. But that's all for the future. The things if you're thinking about now, and we're going to make an assumption here that if you've tuned in for this presentation today, we've already kind of assumed that you are not building your own model portfolios. You've tuned in because you want to see the multi-asset funds that are available on offer. And hopefully we've given you a really good whistle-stop tour, not just in this presentation, but across all of the talks today, of the range of solutions that are available, both funds and MPS. And that's probably the first thing that you might want to consider. Am I more interested in buying funds? Am I more interested in buying an MPS solution? Some of that might be part of your prod considerations. Certain clients might be more suitable for funds versus MPS, but certainly your prod and your client segmentation will be very much features of whether you go down the funds and MPS, or you make a selection depending on the client that's sat in front of you. We've tried to give you a wide range of solutions today and show you some of the solutions that are available. But the direct lines versus a fund-to-fund approach is also something that you want to consider. And again, this is due to the complexity and the costs associated with the solution and what you want to put in front of your client. Fettered versus unfettered, I think, will be an important thing that you want to consider, particularly in an MPS world and also in funds for that matter, to be honest. What you tend to find is your lowest cost operators tend to be fettered propositions because, of course, if you're running a fettered proposition and you're also providing the underlying investment solutions, what you've got there is an opportunity to capture two parts of the value chain. The asset allocation, the portfolio management part, but also the implementation route. And so fettered versus unfettered, particularly in an independent financial advice capacity, is something that you probably want to consider. Thankfully, these days, the battle between active and passive management isn't as evangelical as it once was. Active versus passive is a bit more of a kind of nuanced discussion these days, and the two parties have gone off to discuss Brexit versus a kind of Remainer territory. And increasingly what we're seeing, and I'll touch on this a bit later, is what we're seeing in our world is a blended approach seems to be where the market is at this moment in time. Active or passive isn't where the discussion is at this moment. It seems to be how can we blend the two, how we can get the best of active, the best of passive solutions, blend the two of them, which in something we call pactive. I'm sure others call it simply blended solutions. Pactive is a horrible word, but you know exactly what it means. We're seeing more and more business go into our pactive solutions, and that's where the vast majority of most advisors who are using our MPS are placing their money. More so these days, however, is an additional consideration that's your ESG or responsible, as we think is the more appropriate nomenclature, versus your more traditional approach. Now, of course, ESG and responsible has been very, very popular in recent years. The old adage has been, well, if you take an ESG with ethical restrictions on the portfolio, those restrictions ought to lead to lower performance. Of course, your ethical restrictions have kept you away from banks, kept you away from natural resources in recent years, and therefore in recent years you've tended to outperform. That's definitely fueled some of the adaptation of responsible solutions, and as a consequence, responsible versus traditional is another consideration that you might want to consider. Now, of course, we've not been hit with the European legislation. Over in Europe, they are now decreed by regulation to ensure that they have that conversation with their clients about whether they want to be responsible or impactful in their investment solutions versus a more traditional approach. We don't, at this moment in time, it's not currently in UK regulation, but given that we were major advocates, and you look at what's happening in the government in Build Back Better and Green New Deal and all this kind of stuff, we wouldn't be surprised if in future the FCA introduce a requirement for advisors to have a conversation with their clients about responsible investment versus more traditional investment. So that's something that you might want to consider going forward. But ultimately, all of these things to think about all come back to one thing, and it's the role of an advisor, which is your client. Now, our view at AJ Bell is no one knows your clients better than you do. You're the person who sat with them on a day-to-day basis, have known these people for years, know their likes, dislikes, or their pros, their cons, their fears and their aspirations. You know your client better than anyone else, and therefore it's for you to decide which is the most appropriate solution. And that's really been the purpose of today. It's been bringing a whole wide range of solutions in the multi-asset world to you so that you can take a look at what's out there. Of course, there are other solutions available, but we've tried to give you a nicely rounded view of what's taking place in the marketplace so that you and your clients make the right decisions. Now, I did say, if you will indulge me, it would be remiss of me as the director of the investment business to stand in front of you at a multi-asset presentation and not just give you a 90 seconds on our own proposition. As I said to you there, you know your client better than anyone else on the planet. And therefore, our starting position is on the basis that you know your client. Our role as an investment manager is to provide you with all of the solutions and tools for you to service your clients. If a plumber turned up at your house and you said to him, I want you to plumb in the shower and I want you to plumb in the washing machine, and he said, I'm sorry, I only do washing machines, I don't do showers, you would think he was a pretty poor plumber. Our view is the same on asset management. Whether we're active, passive, income or growth, funds or MPS, we have a solution that's available for you. So every one of the MPS solutions are available active, passive, pactive. Also, we've recently introduced our responsible range, so they're available for accumulation portfolios ranging from DT3 through to DT8, or whatever risk profiling tool that you're using. There are income solutions available to you as well. And in terms of costs, we are at the low end of the marketplace. Our view is that investment management, and some of the other presenters won't appreciate me saying this today, but investment management is, in our view, largely commoditized, and therefore we price it as a commodity. So no matter what solution you take from AJ Bell, the fee you pay to AJ Bell for managing your clients on a discretionary basis is just 0.15%, 15 basis points. And as a consequence of that, the solutions, whether they be active, passive or pactive, or responsible solutions, come in at the prices that you can see on your screen. And I said to you, funds or MPS, a number of our solutions are also available in fund format. So our range of funds, from cautious all the way through to global growth, our two income funds, and more recently our responsible growth funds, they're also available. They mirror the MPS, but they're also available in a fund format. That's enough from me. Really appreciate that you've given me the time to walk you through our solution. Hopefully set some context for all of the other speakers today. And without further ado, I'll hand you back to Danny. Thank you very much.